Hi everyone, today we'll be talking about governance and leadership as one of the components of ISQM 1 as contained in the ED format currently. One might ask, why do we need all these changes? Because ISQM 1 had the requirements for leadership, but like the title says, it says leadership alone. But now with the ISQM, we're covering both aspects of governance and leadership. It's only because there was a gap in the ISQM 1 standard that is now outgoing, because it didn't have enough requirements and guidance on governance aspect. And as a result, it required the revision as well. In terms of the overview of the changes, you will see that there is aspects of ISQS1 that are also carried forward with respect to leadership responsibilities. And we'll touch on that a bit later on. And then also, this part of the component of governance and leadership is contained as the first part of the ISQM1. And that is not a coincidence. It's simply because leadership of every organization drives what happens in an organization. And they are key to ensuring that whatever the firm employs in terms of the strategies, operations, resources that the firm employs, that it enables the firm to attain the quality objectives. Let's first look at the comparison of the changes. With the extended ISQC1, there was still a requirement that a firm should establish policies and procedures that will also enable the firm to ensure that there is a culture of quality management for every engagement that we performed. And then also there was a requirement as well that the ultimate responsibility for the firm's systems of quality management should be assigned to the leadership that has appropriate experience, ability, and also the necessary authority to also take charge of the quality management systems themselves. Now, when you look at ISQM 1, you will see what is exciting in terms of what we should all embrace as auditors, because it's something that we relate to. I mean, as part of our engagements, we also look at the risk management and risk assessment processes. So if you look at the ISQM 1 requirements, you will see that it actually follows a three-step approach in the risk assessment process. And the first part in the approach is that we should actually ensure that we address the 6 quality objectives of which they are prescribed. However, the word prescribed doesn't mean that we all have to do as the standard says. There is room to actually adopt and align the requirements to your environment, because every firm is different. For example, with the size of the firm and then also the nature of the engagements that you perform. And the second part of the steps is that we should actually identify what are the risks, what could go wrong that might actually not enable us to actually achieve the quality objectives as set out in the standard, and also additional objectives that we might actually identify. And we don't only stop there. So the third part is that we should then also come up with the responses that will be driven as well by the leadership of the firm to ensure that we address the risks that we will have identified. As I said, ISQC1 requirements were also carried forward in terms of what I mentioned with the comparison, and where it's carried forward is in the part of the quality objectives. So let's explore that further. When we look at the governance and leadership, where it's positioned, and we look at the house of systems of quality management, you see that it's positioned right at the top, like the roof in every house, because it serves a role of an overarching responsibility for quality management. This is the part in the standard where when we look at this, we look at things together holistically. We see the interlink and the integration of different components of systems of quality management. However, the governance and leadership of the organization plays a critical role of ensuring that there is integration not only with the planning, but also the execution of plans of every organization to ensure that we are able to address all other components of the systems of quality management. Now, when we look at the quality objectives, firstly, like I said, it's 6 of them. Let's look at the first one. And as I said, there is also a carry forward from the extended ISQC1. The first requirement is that every firm should have a culture that is committed to quality. And I emphasize commitment. And we actually demonstrate that commitment through our conduct. And this also touched on professional ethics as well, with respect to how we do things as a firm as well. So being a quality-driven firm, it has to be a culture of every organization that actually adopts the international standards of auditing. Because this will not be an option, but a requirement for us to actually comply with. And that culture as well has to be also led by the leadership of the organization. Hence, we talk about the tone at the top. And also with this culture as well, it means that with the firm culture, for it to be lived and be consistent as well, from individual to individual, it requires a firm to have clear communication channels that is consistent as well, and also that will be effective as well in ensuring that everyone understands what are the requirements when it comes to behavior of the firm, and in terms of also the commitment to the culture of quality in the firm. Now, the second requirement is that the firm leadership as well has to take the responsibility and accountability for the systems of quality management of the firm. And you will see there is a flow in these requirements, because culture speaks to how do we conduct ourselves. For example, how do you go about getting the business for the firm? It speaks to the conduct, right? And it touches a lot on the culture. However, the leadership responsibility as well, when you are accountable for that, you also ensure that you are also in touch with what is happening in the firm as well. Not only setting the rules, but also ensuring that there is adequate monitoring and review of what is happening in terms of adopting and implementing the quality management systems of the firm. So this will also take that every leadership structure, be it a CEO of the firm or managing partner or the board of partners, depending on the size of the firm, that group or individual should have the right experience and knowledge to be able to execute and take that oversight and responsibility and accountability role for the systems of quality management. In addition to that, as a third quality objective, is that every firm's strategic decision and action should actually demonstrate quality commitment. And how do you achieve that? It means that when we set our strategic objectives, we should start with quality in mind as a driver of the discussion and as a driver of how do we set our strategy and what actions, as in strategic actions, which are referred to as strategic enablers. For example, your operational resources, human resources, IT resources, those are strategic enablers. And for us as leadership to make a decision as to what is it that we're going to commit to and prioritize, that should be driven by the question of how do we ensure quality in all our engagements. Therefore, there should be clear alignment and proper planning as well of resources as well for the organizations to enable us to achieve these quality objectives. After having set the strategic objectives and actions that support our strategies, we should actually set out the organizational structures that will actually support and enable us to achieve those strategic objectives. And in so doing, we're actually going to be required to relook at our current structures as well. For example, if you have a structure of having the board of partners and EXCO and the CEO, as much as the standard actually speaks to all, you could either assign the responsibility of the quality systems of quality management to the CEO or the managing partner or the board of managing partners. It means that we have to look at our delegations of authorities, for example, and the terms of references of different committees if you've got an EXCO as an example. And the reason why we need to do that is so that we are sure that the authority that we've delegated to different roles in the firm is that it will enable those individuals to be able to achieve the objective of being accountable for the quality management systems. So in addition to the structures of the firm, the fifth objective is that we should actually plan for the resources that will enable us to achieve all our systems of quality management objectives. And speaking of resources, I'm sure you'll agree with me that it doesn't matter what plans you have for the firm. At the end, we are actually as good as the resources that we have. For example, human resources, technological resources. If those are not adequate enough, there is no way we'll be able to achieve the strategic objectives that we will have actually set out. So when you do your budgeting, remember that quality should be at the center of what you decide on in terms of how you allocate your financial resources. And if you look at the ISQM, the financial resource category is one that is actually emphasized under the governance and leadership component. Because leadership, if you don't have the means to actually enable you to action and implement what you have set out, it means that there is no way you can provide the required assurance that your firm has implemented the adequate systems of quality management. And lastly as well, as part of the required quality objective that we need to address, as we know, we operating under the framework of the laws and different standards that we have to comply with. So the standard actually requires us to actually ensure that we have a clear objective that we will actually discharge our roles and responsibilities in compliance with the laws, regulations, and professional standards that are applicable to our firms as well. So once we have set those quality objectives, and remember 6 is the minimum requirement. However, as a firm, you need to understand what is applicable to your environment, looking at the nature of the clients that you're servicing, looking at the structures of your firm as well, and then also understanding what could be the limitations that you might actually face that might not actually enable you to meet your quality objectives. So once we've set the objectives, we then need to sit back and then do a second phase of the risk assessment, which is to identify the risks that might actually occur that might not enable us to achieve the quality objectives. And in that risk assessment, we don't stop there, as I said. We then have to identify the responses. And the ISQM standard goes further to actually prescribe the 3 areas that we have to address as part of our responses. And these are see them as inherent risk areas. And these are the areas where we say we have a risk that a firm might be in a position where no one takes responsibility and ultimate accountability for the systems of quality management. And the second risk is that the firms might not have adequate processes of ensuring that there is adequate performance management that would drive the behavior that ensures quality management. And the third risk is that firms might not have adequate processes that ensure that we adequately deal with the allegations and complaints that might come from the way we do or conduct our engagements. So let's explore these 3 responses to these 3 risks. Firstly, with respect to assigning of responsibility and accountability for systems of quality management. Every firm has to assign that responsibility, overall responsibility, to someone in the firm. And as I said, depending on the size and nature of your firm, it might be to the CEO, it might be to the board, or it might be to the board subcommittee. That it depends from one firm to the other. And in addition to assigning the ultimate overall responsibility, we are then also required to assign responsibility for various aspects of systems of quality management. This is really acknowledging that no man can do it all. And by having a clear risk assessment process, you'll be able to identify the gaps to say what sort of skill set do we need in the firm or do we have in the firm that we should be assigning the adequate responsibility to. And in answering that question as well, you'll be able to assign the responsibility to the right people with the right experience and also the right level of authority as well. With that assignment of specific responsibility, the standard is very clear that there is also additional 2 aspects that we have to specifically address. And these are the area of the professional ethics. Hence, you find that other organizations, you might look at having an ethics officer, someone that will address the issues of professional independence as well. And the second area is what I call the MRP, the monitoring and the remedial process unit that you might actually have to have. Because since someone needs to have that responsibility for that. It could be that you might have a unit, or you might have an individual to address that. But remember, the standard also has room for scalability as well. In this case, you might find that the smaller firms might actually outsource this function as well. So start thinking about how you are organizing yourselves with respect to assigning of different roles in the firm. And the next part of the requirements in terms of our response is on the performance management side. Usually what they say is that what is not documented or what is not measured never gets done. And this part, it also speaks to how we're going to ensure that we are driving behavior through performance management. And the standard requires that every firm should also conduct periodic performance evaluation. And with a key requirement for individuals that are assigned different roles for the systems of quality management. And performance management as well will speak to how are we rewarding different individuals in the firm for the promotion and attainment of the achievement of what we've implemented to address the quality objectives of the firm. And on the flip side as well, we'll speak to how are we ensuring that there is consequence management for those that are not actually compliant or living the culture of quality management. And this as well links very well to what I mentioned earlier on the MRP. So in our remedial processes, what are we doing and how are we ensuring that the firm also incorporates quality as one of the key performance measures as well in terms of performance management. And lastly, the third part of the responses that we have to also ensure that we address as firms is that we must have clear processes for dealing with complaints and allegations. And in this one as well, you must also look at your roles and responsibilities. How are they actually assigned to firms as well? Look at your structures as well to say the structures that we have, are they enabling you as a firm to have a fair process that will allow you to have those complaints and allegations coming forward and also being adequately addressed? For example, if you're one partner firm, you will find that there is no other way but to outsource this part of the requirement as well. And then also if you're a larger firm, for example, you will look at your delegations of authority. If this is dealt with by the CEO, how are you ensuring that there is no bias and that there is adequate measures actually implemented to address this part of the requirements? Looking at what ISQM requires, we can see that this speaks to how we should be doing business. And we should embrace these requirements as leadership of different firms. And the approach that is followed, it's also going to give us clear guidance as leaders of the firm to ensure that we look at the systems of quality management holistically as well, and that we are able to integrate various aspects of systems of quality management. With the risk assessment process, it's also really what we should be doing as well, because it's going to help us to be more proactive as well in terms of addressing those threats that we actually face in our various firms. I encourage you to start now in terms of doing the gap analysis to identify those areas that you currently do not address in your firms currently. This is a nice guideline for practice management, and I really urge you to embrace it and begin now. Thank you.